Thanks. Thank you, Arik. Welcome, everybody. We're super excited to be hosting AI Day here for New York Tech Week. Really awesome to see everybody. We're going to give you a good show, so appreciate your investment of time. Bolt, if you haven't heard of us, is a vibe coding tool. We were the first ones to put vibe coding in the browser. Lets you turn your idea into software or websites without having to figure out all that nerd stuff like Git and terminal and that kind of thing. So we're bringing software creation, software development to non-developers.
Without further ado, I'd like to kick off the Fireside. And if you are going to be here with us later today, we're going to have a great chat with Marilutsky from Graphite, recently got acquired by Cursor. Thank you guys all for being here, and I hope you enjoy New York Tech Week and enjoy this conversation.
Thank you. All right. Hey, New York Tech Week. Welcome to an AI Day. It's the day of AI. Don't we love AI, folks? All of us here? All right, Alex. Here we are, finally. And I think probably the best place to start is just to kind of go into like the origin of Bolt.new and StackBlitz, the parent company. So can you kind of talk about, where you entered the picture with StackBlitz and what your sort of job originally was when you came into the company? Because people that don't know, this is a company that's been around before the advent of vibe coding. So
absolutely, yeah. And I just want to say thanks for being here. Really appreciate you coming to moderate the talk. So yeah, Bolt was really an experiment that came out of a previous company called StackBlitz. And the original idea for StackBlitz was building software requires you to set up all this complicated local stuff on your computer, which is difficult even for software developers. At some companies, it can take you like literally, this sounds crazy, but it can take you like 2 weeks to get your local software development environment set up as a dev when you join a new company. And so the idea with StackBlitz was, what if we could put all of those tools in the browser? Because really every productivity software that has scaled up to like 1 billion plus users, they all run in the browser. And think Google Docs, Google Sheets, that kind of thing. And so we basically wanted to be like the G Suite for code before AI had come into the picture.
And so you were one of the, if not the first software engineer employees at the company, right? So can you kind of talk about coming into a company that is, entirely at that point run by, devs? And what was that like for you? And what were those sort of like early times like?
Yeah, a great question, because I don't know how many folks here have worked very closely with product and engineering teams, but being the first non-software developer to join a tiny startup, it's like a real transition moment where the team can be like, who the heck is this business guy coming in here, thinking he can do anything useful for the company? Or you can kind of have it play out the way it did at StackBlitz, which was I was very lucky to be like quickly accepted into the team and partner very closely with the first 6 folks that were at the company, all still here today, and we're still grinding and working together to make product that delivers value for customers. And then I get to come in and make sure that value actually is distributed and received by the customers. So, it's a very healthy partnership between the engineering crew and the rest of the company.
Yeah, so let's talk about, the actual creation of Bolt.new, the product. Where did that originally stem from, this idea of, language to develop software? Take me into that pivot and what that moment was like internally at the company.
Absolutely, yeah. So in summer of 2024, I'd been at the company for about 4 years at that point. The company had been operating since late 2017, and the underlying technology of running code in the browser, the StackBlitz product, was widely adopted, especially in the open source software development community. And we had a few enterprise use cases that we were selling into, but we hadn't found the level of commercial success that is required to continue operating a venture scale business. And so we had tried a number of experiments to unlock more commercial success that had not worked. And at the point of summer of 2024, we were considering winding down the company and returning the remaining capital to investors and going to work on something else. But we got an early preview of Sonnet 3.5 from Anthropic. And for the first time, we realized like, oh, wow, these AI models can actually write code that executes and doesn't error out. And so we decided to give it one last go, one last product experiment to see if we could find a bit more of a commercially viable application for this run code development environment in the browser technology that we'd been building for, at that point, 6-7 years. So and obviously it worked pretty well. So that was, I think, very exciting for everyone on the team to finally see one of the experiments really like take root.
And then take me into when that starts taking root. What does that feel like for you, as the COO of the company, saying, we've been trying all these things, stuff has been working, some stuff hasn't been working, and then suddenly it's like the rocket ship just goes like boom, right?
Yeah.
What is that like?
It was a wild feeling. I remember it was a couple days. It was like the day before my brother's wedding, and I was working on the launch tweet thread with our CEO Eric until like 2 or 3 in the morning, and we were very focused on making this tweet thread as strong as we possibly could. But honestly, at the time, we thought we were launching like a tool for developers, something to help developers kind of get started, go from 0 to 1. And our audience was developers. That's who we were selling to. And so we did not expect to break out. Our plan was actually to relaunch like a month later to a broader audience. And we were really not expecting to break out of like the developer Twitter bubble with this launch. It immediately like went super viral because I think, as probably everyone recalls in this room, like 18 to 24 months ago, I mean, it's still happening today, right? You see new capabilities being unlocked that were just completely impossible the week before. And vibe coding in the browser, being able to create software without writing code, accessible to anyone, was brand new. And so it really, really broke out of that dev Twitter bubble and just immediately started having this explosive growth. But in the first few days, I mean, we thought, okay, great. We had a good tweet. A good tweet doesn't make a company. This is going to taper off and slow down. But it kept on going from there.
So how big was the company? How many employees when Bolt first shipped?
I think we were at like 15. Definitely less than 25 folks at the company at that point. So it was a very, very tight crew.
So, I mean, talk to me about scaling, kind of going from, this small company that, small but mighty or whatever, into, now you're making deals with Microsoft, right? You're in all of these, really, high level, high pressure environments. And, it wasn't that long ago that you were managing a really small team. So like, what internally is that like to sort of make that transition scale and sort of like kind of like internally scale the way that you think about your work?
Yeah, there's a lot of pieces to that. I mean, thinking back to the early days, the first thing that broke is with a team of 20, we had nobody on the team had customer success in their title. And so you go 4 weeks into the launch, and we have tens of thousands of paying customers all of a sudden, and they're, flooding the support inbox, and it's like, we're just trying to keep the service online.
Team of 15.
Exactly. And so customer support was the first thing that broke. And that was our first opportunity to, start becoming a AI native company, as people like to say, which we can talk about what that actually is.
I'm a VC investor, and now I want to give you all my money.
Yeah, thank you. We can talk more about like what that actually looked like, but we hired our first agent at that point in time to solve that problem, because you cannot hire a human support team quickly enough to support tens of thousands of paying customers that come on in the period of a few weeks. So, and then from there on, it was just like there's a series of scaling challenges that have come at us a lot quicker than is normal, right? A common question is, oh, what stage are you guys? And I always say, well, we raised Series B, but we're not like a traditional Series B company that took years to get there, probably has over 100 employees, and has had time to develop a lot of those like human-driven processes and teams and capabilities. I think a lot of companies in these newer cohorts that are scaling so quickly are having to solve those problems in new ways, faster and with agents. And so there's been a lot of learnings about how to run a company in a different way that I do think is the beginning of like a new and durable approach to company building that we're going to see continue on.
I mean, that's the fascinating thing, right? Is that there is no playbook for this new kind of growth. I don't know if unprecedented is the right word, but there's nothing like it. So you really don't have, many, comps that you can look at and say, okay, we're growing like this company. How do we sort of like take their lessons and internalize them? And instead, it sounds like what you've had to do is rely on a lot of the hard lessons that you learned in, when it wasn't the salad days, right? Like before Bolt.new. So can you kind of talk about what that era of the company kind of taught you about, just everything that you're doing now? You started doing enterprise, now you're doing enterprise again. How is that different? How is that the same?
Yeah. I mean, I think everybody here, you came to the right talk, because I'm going to give you the secret to building a multi-million-dollar company. It's AI has changed everything. It's just a magical pill that will solve all your problems.
Just leave to his Bolt.
The reality is, I don't think that there's any secret out there like that. And if there is, and any of you find it, please do let me know. But for us, it really has been in many ways, the same fundamentals that we learned in the early days of the business when things were hard and things weren't working. It's those same fundamentals that we're using today. And so I think there is an aspect of what's old is new again, but there are some things that have changed as well. And I think one thing I'll say on, things that we learned in the early days, doing it yourself, doing each function, each role yourself is super critical, especially when you hit scale, because you have to make decisions quickly and you have to understand the type of person that you can hire in to succeed in that role, including if that person is an agent. And this gets at like one of the most fundamental like mental models that I've been talking a lot recently around agents is, I think the right way to think about using them in your company is really thinking of them as junior employees that need to be trained and managed the same way that you would a human coworker. And so the ability to understand the task that needs to be accomplished, the sort of standard operating procedure of how you would make decisions, the guardrails and compliance aspects that you would apply to a human employee, right? Like, to give you an example from my prior life before startups, I was in finance at Amgen, and you don't give every junior employee access to every row of the financial data at a multinational company. That exposes, a lot of risks for like insider trading and that kind of thing. So you have compliance layers on top of that database. So if you're like at a big organization trying, or a company like ours trying to implement agents to solve a problem, you still need to have that same fundamental understanding of the role and the guardrails and the process that you do for solving that problem with humans. So I think there's a lot of parallels that we're seeing there.
I definitely want to come back to that, but I do want to ask, what are some good examples of agents that you're using on a daily basis? Do you have scheduled morning briefings, or anything that you're currently doing? I think as the first non-technical employee at the company, I'm really interested to know how code sort of manifests in your daily life.
Absolutely. So, going back to those early days, like I mentioned, the first agent that we hired at the company was our customer success robot, which at the time we called Sam. And we were renaming. There was an internal debate, so I think we're going to rename away from Sam now.
Didn't stand for something?
No, it was just it was the company that we partnered with for that agent. That was just a name that they came up with, and we were like, yeah, Sam, that works.
Sure.
We rolled with it. And in the early days, the best practices, let your customers know if they're talking to an agent versus a human. We had not figured, nobody really had figured that out in the very early days of this. And there were some issues that cropped up at another company that I think opened everyone's eyes to, like, okay, we need to really like make sure it's clear in the signature of the agent that it is an agent. But in the early days, no one was doing that. And it was incredible to see like the feedback rolling in from the customers, just like warmly thanking Sam and like, you really helped me. And like, and then they're in like the customer success surveys, they would literally respond.
Sam was the best.
Yeah, like we love to like make sure, this employee gets recognized and like, and that kind of thing. And so that was really the first major workflow because, again, tens of thousands of paying customers, zero customer support people. So we had to take a bit of a risk and pull the trigger on that. And it's worked out incredible. And we're still using an evolved version of that agent today. Another example is much more recent. We were interviewing for a financial analyst position at the company. And one of our guys on the data team, Thomas Mickley Doyle, built this tool that we're calling Query internally and plugged it directly into our data lake where we aggregate the information from all of our systems. And it can like go in, create, pull together narrative, tables, charts, visuals, all the things that you would have done in like a tool like Tableau or Power BI, which requires quite a bit of skill to build out these static reporting dashboards in the past. And so we've ended up, this tool has gotten massive adoption across our entire organization, and we have decided to roll with Query as our data analyst. So those are just a couple examples of stuff that we've done internally. Obviously on our engineering team, it like goes way deeper. Mm-hmm. I'm not the right guy to talk about that, but we're really finding uses across different departments. And it really does go back to understanding the job to be done, the proper way to do it, and making sure that you either build or buy a well-tailored solution for that particular process.
Yeah, and like you were saying, we're sort of in this era now where, you manage these agents, right? You have to be a manager to really understand what it is. And so if you've always been an individual contributor, that is sort of a difficult adjustment to make. Mm-hmm. So, when you're talking to people and they're saying, or you're trying to like sell, the product into, enterprises, a lot of these people probably don't have that experience being a manager and like having to, be responsible for, another employee. Like we're saying, sometimes it feels like a coworker, but you need to monitor them. You need to, give them performance reviews or whatever you want to say. And yeah, like what's your advice to kind of getting people into that mindset of being a manager and being ready to, kind of take ownership of these agents?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think for anybody who's made the transition from like an individual contributor role to a managerial role, is you have to kind of change your thinking around what delivering value for the organization looks like and what productivity feels like. For me, that's like been the biggest one. And this is also kind of a side effect of an organization that grows so rapidly, is the level of responsibility that I've gained towards like the team and everyone on the team. And my role in what productivity looks like for me has transitioned from making deliverables, right? Which is, as individual contributor, you may have this sense of, well, I made this PowerPoint deck, I made this Excel sheet, etc. And so I kind of produced X number of widgets for the company this week. So I was productive. And when you make that transition to managing a team, your productivity is more about how you enable, up-level, train, and unlock your team. That same mindset shift is, I think, what is needed to be like a manager of agents. And we have this thinking internally that a individual human in the future will be managing a team of somewhere between like 10 and 50 agents, and they'll be able to outcompete what a traditional team of just humans would be able to do because of the ability to orchestrate and manage at scale across the agents. What does that look like practically? Agents are not fire and forget tools. They, you mentioned performance reviews. Like, what's the performance review for the agent? Well, you should ask yourself that question before you launch one out in your organization, because if you're a people manager and you launch your individual contributors out into the company, you never check on how they're performing, right? That's not a good thing. So you might think about capturing audit logs of like the decisions that the agent makes, because I always want to be able to go back if the agent's be able to actually take action on things in your company and update other systems and move data around. Like, you need to be able to go in and see a transactional audit log of what it decided to do and have enough information there that you can reverse the decision if you want to. Then as models improve, something that we see for Bolt and for any agent that you create is every new model unlocks new capabilities and levels of intelligence and problems that the thing can solve. So you kind of need to take that performance review like feedback that you get from seeing how the agent's performing, compare it to the new capabilities that may be unlocked with new models, upgrade it to the new model version, and then another one is like just thinking about training. You think, there's model training, which is like what the big boys are doing at the
data centers.
Yeah, and that's really expensive, compute heavy, etc. But training the agent is exactly like training like a human employee. You can literally just provide it written feedback and additional instructions and knowledge. And so thinking about as the capabilities expand and as you learn more in the organization about what the tool is being used for and how and where it's succeeding, where it's failing, it's a constant sort of upgrade and evolution cycle. But the awesome thing about it is those upgrades, you don't have to call engineering. It's literally just a text file that you provide your insight and judgment into, and the agent picks it up and runs with it from there. So very much like, a quarterly performance review with a human employee.
Yeah, and similarly to, a human employee, if you just, use another model to say, give me the prompt for this, it's probably going to give you a bit more than you need, or it's not going to give you exactly what you want. You just need to have that human, touch of understanding or whatever to kind of get the most out of these models.
Yeah, I think like taste and judgment have become really the most important skill for organizations that are using a lot of AI in their day-to-day processes, because I'm sure everybody's seen like these AI written articles on LinkedIn, and it's just so obvious that there was no human taste or judgment layered on top of that.
It feels lazy, right?
Super lazy. I hate reading that stuff because I'm like, if I wanted to read raw model output, I could have just put this into, the AI model myself. And so, and the same thing is true in the organization for actual business workflows. If I wanted it done super mediocre and halfway, then we wouldn't. Then you actually wouldn't have need for the human managers in the organization, right? But that's not the level of work output that I think any organization is looking for. That's why people are so careful on who they hire and training and development and feedback, and those same principles absolutely apply here.
Yeah. So I'm curious if you could kind of talk a little bit about, some of Bolt's major industries that, you found success kind of selling into. I think people might be a little confused or not confused, but, surprised about some of the industries that are currently using Bolt.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as were we surprised as well, right? Going back to that initial launch, like I said, we were thinking that we would be selling a lot to software developers. And what we really found is that there's, it's actually non-developers that are the primary users of tools like Bolt. And so another thing I get asked a lot, right, with all the news and hype is like Bolt versus Cursor and Claude Code and Codex. And I really see our tool and the tools in our class as cooperative with those tools. We're a different interface for a different type of user. And so we've really seen two main, user profiles emerge. The first one is in the enterprise, and I'll talk about that first because I want to get on to the one that has got me more personally excited right now. But in the enterprise, we're seeing product managers, designers, leaders using the Bolt interface to go from 0 to 1 on a brand new idea. In the past, building technology products was like this very heavy process where you would have like a product manager or executive write out the idea in a product requirements document. They'd hand that off to another team, product or design, to actually prototype the thing, often in a tool like Figma, pixel perfect, very time consuming. And then you'd hand those two assets off to software developers to actually go build the first POC, MVP of the thing. And often at that point, you realize, we didn't quite design that right. The way we described this workflow isn't actually gonna, we put that in front of the user and they didn't understand it. It's confusing. User are gonna get stuck here, etc. You go back to the beginning of the process. You rewrite down the requirements, you redesign, you go back to end. So that's the way software has been built for, at the majority of enterprises for the last 20, I don't know, I guess probably coming on 30 years, maybe back to 95. And what we're seeing is a total reorganization of the capabilities of those three parts of that process, where you start in Bolt, you get a working prototype of your idea that you can share around the entire organization and externally, get user feedback, fully realistic. You can connect it to real data sources. You can put mock data in there, whatever you want, and get full consensus and belief in the idea before you send it over to engineering to wire it up to the back end and integrate all the APIs and do all the behind the scenes, technical plumbing work that's required for an enterprise scale app. So that's been what we've really seen in the enterprise. And then the more surprising and exciting thing that we're seeing happen right now is this technology starting to get out into what I would call the real economy, the 99% of companies that do not have a software development team. And we're seeing founders and entrepreneurs and business owners across all kinds of segments like real estate, health and wellness, retail, e-commerce, a lot of agencies, marketing agencies and web dev agencies. That one makes a ton of sense on the surface of it, but adopting this tool and allowing companies that previously would not have had access to custom software due to the heavy cost of this process of how that software is created, getting custom fit to purpose tools for their business. And so that's a really, really exciting trend that we expect to see continue and accelerate, because sitting here today, we're at the very early innings of this stuff. If you're in this room, you live in New York, SF, you're at Tech Week, you're at the epicenter of people that are thinking about this stuff and adopting these tools. But the vast majority of the real economy, just normal folks out there, haven't even graduated past ChatGPT in terms of the complexity and power of the tools they're using. So we expect this to grow, this entire market that we're a part of starting to grow significantly in breadth and depth over time.
Well, and this gets into something that I'm really curious to ask you about, which is, as you say, the vast majority of people out there, maybe they've used ChatGPT, but that's kind of the end of it. And I'm sure anyone that's been walking around the city or on the subway recently has seen some truly awful ads for AI companies. I don't know. Can anyone here raise their hand if they've seen a really bad ad for an AI company recently? It's a lot. So, why is advertising AI, so difficult to sort of get that understanding across? And what can we do to fix it?
Yeah, going back to something you said earlier about this being brand new, what does that actually mean, right? From a marketing perspective, it means that there literally aren't words. There aren't generally understood words even that you can use in marketing for some of the capabilities of these tools. So if you think about our tool, right, it generates code and builds software. Well, there's a bunch of terms out there. All the developer tooling, companies, which we were one of, have figured out the terms on how you market that to developers. But normal people don't know any of those words.
They don't know what an IDE is. They don't know what a CLI is. They don't know what Kubernetes are.
Exactly. And so that's just a very practical example of the challenge that any marketing team in this space has is the words exist, but they're not words that your customers, assuming you're doing what we're doing, where you're expanding access to this technology out to a broader audience, the real economy, you can't use those words. They're not gonna land with your audience. And so that's just one, we're literally, you're a writer, so you understand the importance of words. If you can't even understand the words that you're using to position the idea, if you have to make those up from scratch, right, or borrow or piece together to figure out how to get your message out there to someone that doesn't come to Tech Week, that isn't on AI, Twitter, or LinkedIn, on their lunch breaks, that alone is a big challenge. So I think I'll give a little bit of grace there in that it is something that we're all trying to figure out how to communicate out to a broader audience. The other side of it, though, is just that I think when you see these really, really fast ARR growth numbers, a lot of that is actually coming from early adopters and the in-group, right? The people that are very curious about these tools for the tool's sake. And, I think and I put myself in that camp, like many people in this room, we want to understand, we are early on a new, we're,
nerds.
We're nerds. We're nerds, and we're really early on a new technology that, I agree, has massive, massive potential to reshape economy, society, and so many aspects of just what the world looks like. Potentially, we're effectively at the beginning of a new, almost industrial revolution level event for the economy. And I'm stealing this from Jensen Huang here, but I thought this was the best way I've heard it described. Is we've arrived at a point in history where we can manufacture intelligence in a factory. That's really what it is, right? Data centers are factories, and they put out it's a different kind of good. It's something we've never been able to make before, something that can reason and make, judgment calls. So yeah, the in-group. Okay, so the in-group, great. Marketing. A lot of the marketing is focused on only the in-group because a lot of the early rapid ARR growth has come from this early adopter crowd. And so I think great. That's why you see all these billboards where it's you're only going to know what that means if you've been really following the recent narratives. And I just think that there's a big opportunity to expand beyond that. And so in our marketing, we're really focusing more on some of these real economy industries and helping people who don't have that tinkerer mentality, who really don't care about the technology and the tool. They just want a solution for their business, looking to speak more directly to them and demonstrate how they can go from where they're at right now, which is intimidated, worried they're going to waste half a day figuring out this technology and get no value out of it when they're busy, business people that have got other things to do, and they don't have inherent interest in this stuff, helping them get that confidence and build those mental models for how you can actually build with a tool like Bolt and see real results and outcomes for your business.
Yeah, and like you say, it's so these tools are so self-directed, right? You get what you give to them.
Yeah.
So if you're not going to give a lot, then you're not going to get a lot, and I imagine that is part of what makes it difficult to advertise them, because they can be used in so many different ways.
Yeah, I mean, traditional SaaS, it's like you have use cases, specific use cases that you built into the tool. Those are the only use cases that you can do with the tool. When your product is a text box that takes input, applies intelligence, and outputs code that could theoretically do anything, the approach to communicating that, especially to someone who just is like, I have XYZ problem. I'm a barber. I have a website that I built a few years ago. It has my phone number on it, but my competitor allows you to book online. That's gaining them more business. I want to have that capability, but I don't have a software development team. I'm a barber, so I can't go pay an agency 30 grand to build some custom software. And I want this thing to, I don't want to have to I don't go on the computer. I don't check my email. I need to get a text when someone books a meeting or books an appointment to get their haircut, so that I'm ready and make sure I've got a chair waiting for them. That person, they need to understand what it is they need to put into that text box to realize that outcome. And they do not want to hear about it in terms that include API and edge functions and, database. So what we're, the good news though, is that because of the way this technology works, the business owner and the person that understands the use case that they're trying to solve is actually the perfect person to build the tool to solve it. Because the good news is the models are actually really good at all of that technological plumbing. What they need is the judgment and taste from the person that actually understands the problem and the solution that they're looking to implement in their business. And so for the first time in history, the actual business owner, the person with the problem, the entrepreneurial minded person, that either owns the company or works inside of a large org, is the perfect person to build the solution because they understand, the use case the best.
Something that I sometimes say to people is that everybody is Steve Jobs now. Steve Wozniak is in your pocket, right? Yeah. Woz is in there. You can be the idea guy, and you can, kind of shunt off a lot of that technical responsibility to the genius in your phone. It's not that difficult. You just have to come prepared and be ready to put in the hard work, right?
Yeah. I completely agree. And the opportunity that presents for entrepreneurial minded people, both in the startup realm, but also in big companies, right? This is another thing that we've been talking about and thinking about a lot, is that in order to adopt these kind of tools, it requires a lot of organizational change, and it requires that entrepreneurial problem solver, creative mindset, and really a willingness to learn and to go put yourself on the line, especially in a large organization. Earlier, Nicole from Built was up here talking about her transition from American Express to the early days of Built. And she talked about the mindset shift and the behavior shift of big co versus small co, and how important it is to shift from how you're perceived to your executional chops, and being willing to put yourself out there behind an actual plan to achieve the outcome and operationally deliver on your idea. And I think that kind of mindset is what's required to make great change inside big companies as well. And it's that confidence to put yourself out there and face potential rejection and face the imposter syndrome of maybe you're a more junior person in a very large established org, right? And you may need to take that's your VC pitch meeting, is when you go into that director VP meeting and you say, hey, I think that there's a real potential for this technology in our organization to make change with XYZ process. Like, I think I can chair this initiative, like, put me in, coach. That's the kind of entrepreneurial mindset that I think you need to get these tools adopted in a large organization, very similar to startups.
And hey, maybe it gets you promoted. That would be pretty nice too.
100%. I mean, just put yourself in the position of a senior leader at like a publicly traded company today. You're seeing all this stuff, and these folks are on LinkedIn too. They see all the hype and everything that's going on with AI, and the talent out there that's really gotten their hands dirty and figured out how to solve real problems with the tools is in extremely high demand. And I still talk to a lot of my friends that are at large publicly traded companies that are attempting to figure out how to implement this technology and get the value out of it. And you would be, if you step up with that entrepreneurial energy in an organization like that, and you're really willing to get outside your comfort zone and raise your hand to be that person, that's gold to the leadership of these companies. They badly need people who understand how to make this stuff work, because the senior leadership, almost by definition, doesn't have the time to actually get in there. There's a reason why there's layers of management, going back to kind of this idea that everyone's a director now with a team of agents. Well, the senior VP of operations at a publicly traded company, they have managers and managers below them to manage the individual contributors, which is exactly what these agents are going to be. So if not you, who? Like, it's not going to be, your SVP of ops that figures out how to actually implement this stuff in the org.
Right. It's someone who's going to have the time and the dedication to really go deep on something.
100%.
Yeah. I think we're almost out of time here, but if anyone has any questions, let's go for you.
So, two questions. One is regarding the input that you were talking about. Like, do you have any, knowing how everything works behind the scenes, do you have any tips how to get the most out of Bolt, and like how to prompt, which language to use, and tips or tricks that you like?
Yeah, absolutely. Back in the early days of the tool, my advice was completely the opposite of this. It was like break everything up into very tiny bite-sized pieces and stuff. This kind of goes back to as the models evolve and capabilities evolve, the way you manage them needs to evolve. Because at first, it was literally like junior intern, mediocre intern level intelligence, where you needed to tell it like exactly in very bite-sized pieces what you wanted. Today, with the strength of the models, my advice is actually you need to be as comprehensive as possible in your description of the process. Think of it how you would train like a very trusted senior employee, where you need to just brain dump everything that you know about the process, the pitfalls, the ways you can get confused and make the wrong decision, and be as explicit as you can. Secondarily, though, the most explicit prompt would be to just paste the code into the Bolt box and say, okay, build me the app and deploy it, right? So there's a spectrum, and at some point, your knowledge ends, right? And your reliance on the Steve Wozniak in your laptop, the tool begins. Tell the model explicitly where your knowledge ends, because what you don't want is for it to, the models are very agreeable. They want to make you happy, and they want to do what you told them to do, right? And so if you don't explicitly say, hey, I'm really relying on you for all of like the back end and integrations, and I really don't know how that works, so please like ask me questions, propose potential solutions, explain the trade-offs. And multi-step, let it talk back to you and interview you, and tell it like, do not, guess on this stuff, and interview me like I'm a non-technical person to get the understanding. Again, it's the same way that you should work with the senior developer. You should not go into your senior developer and just be like, this is what you need to do. Okay, got it, go. Like, no, you definitely need to open the floor for feedback and let them apply what they're good at, where they have their judgment and taste to the problem. So those are probably, with the current state of the models, those are my two strongest tips. Be as explicit as you can about what you do know and what you don't know, and just make the model interview you and until the plan is perfect.
And then execute.
Yep.
I have another question.
I think we only have a little bit of time, so let's go. Let's continue on. All right, you in the back?
You mentioned this idea of the managers, all the way down, right? You still have individual contributors who are doing management over agents. Would you say that in the future, maybe there's no individual contributors anymore? It's just managers, and that's the skill set that folks need with the expertise around maybe what it is they're managing. But I'm thinking about how we train people to be specialized in different functional areas. Does that go away?
Yeah, so I can't speculate on like the far future, I mean, I guess I could, but I'm not going to. I think it's very like uncertain what things look like in 20, 30 years, right? But in the next 5 years, from what I'm seeing, I think that specialized human training for humans in specific areas of taste and judgment is going to continue to be very important ingredient in that mix. I do think what we'll see is a bit of a blurring of the lines, right? Because, if you're reviewing, modifying work that is started in by an AI tool, right? We see this like in our org a lot, where we'll start things in Bolt that would just me, right? Me or Donald, who's somewhere in this room, we'll cook something up. But if we need it to look like perfect, we got to send that Bolt project over to the design guys, right? Because I just don't have that much design taste. And there's a certain brand ethos and look and feel, and whatever it is, the magic that designers do that I don't have in my brain. And I do not see that going away in the short term at all. And I think the more creative work, or work where you really care about like the taste of the thing that comes out the other end that you try to do with these tools, the more convinced you'll become of that point.
Right. And maybe it's more like individual contributors, managing a team of agents for the smaller things in their work, like emails or communications or invoicing and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do think the lines may blur of what individual contributor versus manager level work looks like, but the judgment and taste of an IC who's specialized in a specific area, I do not see that going anywhere in the short term.
Yeah, so I have a question. So you mentioned about the customer success. Is that like it had been a silence, we don't know what's happening, and then suddenly it just, it entirely just blow up, and a lot of customers saying, hey, I pay for it and I need the support, and you said that is why you are kind of not really prepared for it. Actually, that is a pattern I observed. Actually, I talked with the founder yesterday, where it basically same scenario where it just been a silence for weeks. It's like driving at the rainy days, not knowing what happened. And almost like leading up, and suddenly there are just inflow of traffic asking about, subscriber service. And he said, he's kind of regret that they didn't seize that opportunity, because their entire service just exploded. The traffic goes away and it never came back. That is how the first project turned down. So I guess my question is that, looking back, before all those explosions happened, is there any signal saying that, okay, you are actually in the right track, you are just not in the right timing, you already have the DNS, and there's some signal where you can, because like I feel like as a founder, we have experienced a journey where we don't know where we are, and we don't know whether we have a TMF, and it just silence, like all those traffic, all those advertisements, you just go nowhere.
Yeah.
And suddenly, maybe in some random Sunday, it just suddenly gonna become viral, and so what happened, right?
Yeah.
Looking back, is there any signal saying, hey, you're actually on the right track, just keep going?
Yeah, you're bringing me back to the tough first 4 years of my time at the company, right? Where it just felt like we definitely felt a lot of that. I don't think I have like there wasn't like some magic signal in the ether, unfortunately that we picked up on. So I don't think I have your answer there, but what we did and what I think you have to do when you're in that time, it's just so important to be as connected as possible to the people that are using your tool, because it's so easy to build something that you think is cool that just isn't actually solving a meaningful problem for the customers. And so, you may end up finding that the direction that you thought you needed to go isn't where you end up going, right? So like I was talking about when we first launched, we really thought that it was going to be a software developer tool, and if we had just kind of launched and been like, cool, that's it, right? And not listened and got close to the customers, we ended up going a very different direction, right? Where if you use our product today, it's very obviously intended to be for people that don't want to get as deep into the weeds as a software developer. And those type of little micro adjustments that you do over time, I think the only way you can do that is by staying really close to the customer. And especially when you do not have product market fit, I think it's even more important that you're really honing in, even if it's a negative signal, right? But really honing in. And so brief example, I know we're running out of time here, but on our previous product, right, it became very clear that putting a dev environment in the browser was great for certain types of people, but we got a negative signal, which is from most software developers, there wasn't enough value add to putting the development environment in the browser versus leaving it local. And so it's kind of that negative signal that gave us clarity of like, okay, well, if we can't get the majority of, there's not that many developers in the world. It's like, globally, it's a pretty rare profession related to everything else. If you can't get most of them to adopt your dev tool, like that was a really strong negative signal of like, this is not going to be the way, right? Which is why we were doing these other experiments of like, okay, we have to find a way to add more value to running it in the browser. And that's like where the AI plugin thing came. And then that's where the not developers thing came in, because not developers have a much better reason to run it in the browser, which is they don't understand any of this crap and they don't want to install it on their computer. And there's all kinds of security problems and et cetera. So yeah, I don't know, stay close. It's like just what Paul Graham says, you got to, it really all, it really is that simple. It's like, you just got to do the basics. You got to talk to the customers. You got to understand the pain. You got to try to solve their problems, and then basically hope you survive long enough to arrive at the right idea at the right time. That's, that's actually the magic secret pill, just grind it out basically.
Build something people.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, I think we have time for one more. Let's go with you.
Hi, I loved your talk, by the way. I'm the founder of a fashion label, and we've got a small business where it's just me and my employee who's another fashion designer. So as you mentioned, as the founder, I really know what use cases that I can use AI to implement and make it more efficient for me so that I can work on like marketing and sales for the business. So what I'm kind of running into is the problem of AI kind of making you over-optimize things. So my philosophy is kind of just like, let me build a thing, let me go live my life. But I'm constantly just thinking of everything that I can build with AI, and it's like constantly fine-tuning it. So do you ever run into that problem, and what kind of advice would you give?
That's a really good question.
Yeah, super relatable, because like as somebody that's been building a lot of tools and stuff with AI recently, especially going back to what you said about having that tinkerer mindset and being a bit of a nerd, it's like, it's super fun to build with the tools, and you can get into like over optimizing and spend more time than you should. Also, there's some things, it turns out, that you can't build with AI yet. And so you can also go down these rabbit holes where you get too fixated on a particular solution, like combination of technologies and approaches to try to solve something, where maybe there's like a much simpler solution that isn't as cool, but instead of some complicated widget, it's like, well, the customer could actually just email me at that point. And like, if all the info was in the email, we could just give them a call and like get the deal done, So sometimes so that's one thing I'd say is, if you're stuck and you're just like, this isn't working, just start over. I see so many people get like stuck into these rabbit holes where they're banging their head on an overly complicated solution to the problem. And, the AI models aren't deterministic. I mean, it sounds funny to say this, like you can have like a bad day. It's not necessarily like a bad day for the models, but you can have like a bad first thought, and it can take you down a bad pathway. So sometimes just start over instead of trying to optimize and fix. But yeah, I think the bigger picture advice moving out of the technology is actually kind of the same thing that we were talking about with William, is like, are you actually building the thing that solves your customer's problem, whether that's an internal customer at a big co or your external customer? Put the first draft of the thing in front of the customer, even if it's not really wired up and it doesn't really work. Let them click through it. That's part of the value of this stuff. You don't have to wait months for software developers to build a demo for you to try out. Put it in front of the people that it's supposed to solve the problem for right out of the gate, get feedback, and then iterate from there, rather than going into like an iteration hole, yourself at midnight off too many Red
Yeah, 'cause
Bulls.
I feel like AI sometimes gives me the same dopamine hit that like social media does. So.
Who has been up till 2 a.m. in the last few months vibe coding? Yeah. Doom prompting, but not dooming, it's fun, right? But no, I mean, it's kind of like to your point, I'm a writer, right? I take a lot of time tinkering around with like the articles that I'm writing. Knowing when it's done is the hardest part, right? And so I would just suggest, if you have a business partner, just, give it to them, say, what do you think? I've done as much as I can, and I think that like stuff like that is really useful. But yeah.
Yep. Talk to a human sometimes.
They've got ideas.
Yeah,
That's
they
smart.
do.
All right. Well, let's give a big round of applause to Alex.